Welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle aspects of the Jewish experience. Today I am joined by actor and poet Géza Röhrig, whose work as an actor includes the lead in the Academy Award and Golden Globe winning film Son of Saul, To Dust, where he played a Hasidic cantor in upstate New York, working with Matthew Broderick, and Resistance, the story of Marcel Marceau, where he played Georges opposite Jesse Eisenberg. He also plays Jesus in Terrence Malick's The Way of the Wind. But in After Poetry Destroys Silence, Géza is but one of a group of poets whose work respond to the Shoah and write in its aftermath. The performance film includes evocative images, narrative events, archival footage, and creative use of sound and music. It offers an innovative approach for the examination of history and today. After is a unique cinematic work that combines film and poetry in an effort to put forward the importance and necessity for verse in a world that still grapples with genocide. The film is directed by Richard Kroehling and includes work by Géza, who has published 8 volumes of poetry, and such poets as Janet Kirshheimer, Yehuda Amichai, Edward Hirsch, and Alicia Susskind-Ostreicher. Géza, welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque.
How are you, Eric?
I'm good. It's great to have you with me. You've been writing poetry for quite a while. When did this begin?
I think the first one right after my grandfather died.
How old were you?
15.
And what set that off?
I missed him. It was a short poem.
Was it about him?
Yeah, I still remember it, yeah. And it was published in my high school's newspaper. That was the first.
And then you just continued writing?
Yeah.
But you had this sort of dual career, or acting wasn't part of your life yet?
It was always dual, but it wasn't acting. At the time I had a band, sort of a punk band, very anti-communist.
This was in Hungary?
This is the 80s.
Okay.
In Budapest, yeah. Yeah, so I didn't publish for a while, and I mostly kept my poems for myself in my earlier years. And then later, after a while, I felt like actually it was the liberation of the Budapest ghetto, the 50th year of the liberation, 1995.
Okay.
That's when my first collection of poems were published by a Jewish publishing house.
In Budapest?
Yeah. This one got translated to German as well.
This was already after communism was gone? I mean, after the Soviets were gone?
Yeah, the Soviets left in 1990, and this was 5 years later.
And were you encouraged to publish at that point, or you just took it upon yourself?
No.
What was the atmosphere?
Well, few things. Number one, I was never a member of the Communist Youth Party, which was in those years a condition to go to university. So if you didn't have a recommendation by the Youth Party, you couldn't go. So I wanted to go to university, but I had a police record and issues, and so I asked around what should I do, and they told me that I should go to university in Poland because they are a little bit a step further on the road of democratization. They don't care about these kind of things. So I learned a bit in Polish, enough to be accepted, and I spent in Warsaw in the Jagiello University 1.5 years. And while I was there, I visited Auschwitz. Not just once. And for like a full month every day, I went there.
Wow.
And the first collection of poems that I published was about this experience. And most of my friends told me it's not a good idea to start a career with such a heavy subject. It certainly will put me into a very, small box.
Right.
Why don't I try to write about, lighter subjects that are not so parochial, particular? You're a teenager, why don't you, there is love. There's a lot of things to write about. So I had serious friends who said that, it's really good, it's really something, but prolong it, publish it a few years later, come out with something else.
You were in Poland writing in Hungarian still?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what prompted that initial visit to Auschwitz?
My grandfather.
He was a survivor.
Well, he was a survivor of the Budapest ghetto.
And the ghetto.
Yeah, so he had one leg. He lost his leg way before the Shoah. And they didn't have the time to take him. I don't know exactly how or what, but he was in the ghetto. They didn't take him to Auschwitz. They killed all his brother's parents. He was the sole survivor of his own family. And he was a retired, nice man who had time for me. And so we developed a very special relationship, friendship, so much so that before he died, I was his last spoken word.
Wow.
He told Géza, he sit up in a hospital bed, the nurse told me, he said, Gézuka, which is a nicer name of a Géza, and he died. And I arrived like a half hour later, I only saw his fake tooth in a cup of water, but the bed was empty, and the nurse walked in and he said, who are you? And I said, well, I'm Géza, I'm his grandson. And he said, that's the last thing he said.
Wow. That's something to leave with you.
Yeah.
And the first set of poems connecting with Auschwitz and with your grandfather, who had not been in Auschwitz.
No.
But still there was that connection.
Yeah.
Was there more than one poem?
The whole poetry book, about 100 pages, was
all about that.
Yeah.
So did you listen to your friends?
No, absolutely not. I published it, yeah.
And subsequent volumes, were they also related to the Holocaust?
That was the first, and then I came out with fictional Hasidic stories, 127 stories, each story a page. I made up a Hasidic Rebbe, and his first word is the first story, and what he said in his deathbed is the last story. So his life's arc starts in Hungary, and then he goes to Bergen-Belsen. Then there are a couple of stories on the boat to America, and then he lands in Brooklyn. So the book has 4 chapters. And there is this part of Bergen-Belsen when the Rebbe is approached by his disciples in the barak, asking all sorts of questions, and he answers. There's like, I would say, 17 stories from the Shoah in this book too.
Are you comfortable possibly sharing one of those stories?
Yes, I share you the last story of the book, which is not in the Shoah. He's already in Brooklyn, he's in his 90s. He has like about 50 grandchildren. And one of the grandchildren is playing down at the playground. And some neighborhood kids ask him the famous question that if God is all-powerful, can he create such a heavy stone, such a heavy rock that even he cannot lift up? It's a very well-known question. I'm sure you heard it too before. It's a tricky question, obviously, because if you say, yes, God can create such a stone that he himself cannot lift up, then it's a trouble, because if he cannot lift it up, he's not all-powerful. But if you say, no, God cannot create a rock that he can't lift up, then you're in trouble too, because he can't do something again. He can't create such a rock. So you're, in either way, you are in trouble. Such a tricky question. So the boychi could not answer this question and ran to his grandfather, crying, saying, I couldn't answer. I was humiliated in the playground, and I'm sure you're such a sage, you must know the answer for this question. Can God create such a heavy rock that he himself cannot lift up? And the Rebbe puts his fingers on the heart of the child, and he said, not that God can create such a rock, such a heavy, heavy rock that even himself cannot lift up, but he already created one right here. It's your heart. Because you're free. God cannot lift up your heart. He needs you for that. He himself cannot do it. So that is the answer. So that's, for example, one story.
How beautiful.
Thank you.
Have these been translated into English?
Some of them, yeah. There was some discussion with the GPS, the Jewish Publication Society in Philadelphia, about publishing it. I don't know if it will ever happen.
I very much hope so.
Let's hope.
You've decided to take part in this film after Poetry Destroys Silence.
Yeah.
What happened? Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? How did it evolve as best you know?
I'm quite lazy. I don't reach out. No, I don't know how they found me, honestly. I have no idea. But it's important. I met Richard. I love the concept. I think he's a very experimental, open-minded, great director. And so it was a no-brainer for me. I felt I always dealt with losses, like we all do. And I do believe that writing, especially poetry, in some ways can be very helpful, both the writer and the reader, to go through such experiences.
Now, his approach was very avant-garde, very experimental.
I think he's always is. He's not a conventional...
He's done a few narratives, but I mean, for you as an actor who typically is in a dramatic feature,
right?
What was this like? Just the process of filmmaking.
I let him work, meaning I love improvisation. I don't have to stick to scripts. I don't think there was a script. If there was a script, it wasn't shared with me. We just met up in a location, and Richard told me to relate to the scene, and so it's sort of loose the way we did it. I think that's the type of filmmaking I like anyway, is where not everything is decided and not everything is by the previously well thought ideas, but something that we let life enter into the process.
And you were part of that discussion in terms of how he would present you? Or you pretty much left it up to him as director?
I didn't just left it up to him. I left it up, obviously, the location, right? I wasn't involved in that. But once I arrived to the location, I very much participated, came up with my ideas. But Richard is a masterful director, so sometimes even in Son of Saul or even with other movies, I always come up with ideas. Richard was very open to them. Sometimes you have a more sort of a dictator type of a director who doesn't want any of it. He said, you are the actor, I'm the director, let's leave it like that. That's also fine.
The producer of the film was Janet Kirshheimer.
Right.
She's also a poet.
Correct.
What kind of relationship did you have with her? Was she the one who reached out to you initially?
I think so. Yeah, I think Janet just moved into my neighborhood, so I hope we'll develop a closer relationship in the future. But yes, so generally speaking, I am only reading stuff in English, which is nonfiction. I'm not sure if my English is well enough to, I can do probably Hemingway, but let's say in the Moby Dick, I probably would need a dictionary for every third sentence there.
I could see you in Moby Dick.
No, I'm just saying that.
Right.
So I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not intimately familiar with Janet's poetry, but I like her a lot.
And let's take a look at a trailer from After Poetry Destroys Silence.
If poetry is going to be as important a form of human speech as I think it is, then poetry must have in its sight the deepest human experiences, and some of them are historical catastrophes. And we need to remember the people who came before us. It's part of the task of poetry to try and bring the dead back to life.
How good it is to wander the broad, wide streets.
Open, close, open. That's all we are.
That we can walk up to history and still forget it. Forget even the act of forgetting.
He come back alive, survive the war, be like he was before.
One of the approaches of Richard really is that he wants poetry to destroy silence, the Holocaust. And you mentioned that your friend said to you in those early years when you wrote your poetry in Warsaw that you didn't want to be typecast. Oh, he's the Holocaust poet.
Yeah.
But with Son of Saul, you became the Holocaust actor.
Right.
What about this whole notion of poetry destroying silence and you participating in a film where you're dealing with the Holocaust in part, and catastrophe and genocide and awful things, and you talk about upbeat or whatever. I'm wondering what your friends might say today.
Well, death in general and Holocaust in particular is something that can be very dangerous to you. You don't have to be Jewish for that. It's something that in the Torah, for example, Moshe many times warns. Hashem, that there are commandments which tell us that we shouldn't cut ourselves, we shouldn't tattoo ourselves in grieving. That there is a tendency to be fixated on pain and fixated on death, which is against life. And I experienced it and noticed in my own life that if I am spending too intense time or too much time around these subjects, it brings me down. So it's a very tricky thing, because on the other hand, you do have to remember, of course, to those who were perished, and you do have to think about how this could have happened with the Western civilization, what led to this point and all that. So it's a subject of my interest. On the other hand, I do need some time out. I do need, and I think I sort of sometimes I have a problem with the balance, because I'm a little bit typecast. Most of the characters I play in movies are Jews.
Yeah, even Jesus.
Jesus is, of course, but right now, you can see I'm right now playing somebody. So
Is that a film or?
yeah, it's a movie. It's a great movie. But the point I'm making is that forget the Holocaust for a second. I am a metaher. I'm not sure if you know what a metaher is. A metaher is someone who's doing the ritual washing of the corpse.
From tahara.
Tahara,
Okay,
exactly.
from purification.
Yes, so I've been doing that for, I don't know, 20 years. And so...
When somebody's about to be buried, you've been involved with the
the
cleansing.
morning, right before the funeral, usually around...
That's a beautiful mitzvah.
It is. And so on the one hand, interestingly, I need death, not a real and personal way, but the physical preparation of a tahara, the burial washing, is an extremely sobering and calming experience. It affects me way more than praying, in a positive way. It's really, death is a huge equalizer. You never know when or how or who goes, and it's something that keeps your life focused, appreciate every day, and all that. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that there is such a thing, especially in contemporary art, when darkness, violence, pain, weird suffering, and all that somehow pushes out joy, pushes out gratefulness, pushes out the awe that we all feel when a baby borns, or just about creation. So it's like we all struggle with that type of thing, but I don't think in my entire life I'm one of those who are still personally very connected through my grandfather of what happened. I don't think my children will have that. My children did not meet, unfortunately, my grandfather, and I do believe that after the survivors, the survivors we have around now, we're mostly like 14, 15 years old.
Or, yeah.
Right? And they are their mid-80s.
So if disappearing.
Right, they're about to disappear. And so we will not have that link to the event without the survivors. So my generation still is very much, especially in Budapest, Hungary, we are still very affected by this. Americans, much younger generation, it will become basically sort of an event which belongs to history.
So the film,
yeah,
trying to use poetry somehow to connect with that past,
yeah,
and deal with it.
Yeah.
And I take it that your poetry, you just told me you wrote a poem on the subway coming here.
Yeah.
Your poetry also, hopefully, will provide that vehicle or art form or whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
to transcend that separation.
Yeah.
Are the poems that you're now writing still related to that past, or are you mixing it up, so to speak?
Oh, I'm spicing it up big time. In my poetry, it's a definite and strong chapter, generally Jewish themes, not just the Holocaust at all, biblical figures or in a lot of ways, but I write a wide areas of subjects. So.
And yet you went to school to study Jewish history and Jewish subjects.
Yeah.
At the Jewish Theological Seminary?
Right.
Because?
Laziness. I didn't want to work during the summer. So
what about those papers you had to submit?
People have to forgive me because writing is time consuming, I just actually read a poem, 3 lines only, and under the poem it said, 1972 to 1985. That means this person wrote those 3 lines for about 15 years. So what do you want from me? You know, understand? I spend hours and hours every day writing. And sometimes it's really very productive, and sometimes all I do is write something 9 a.m. and I cross it out at 3 p.m. and that would be it.
And yet, you wrote a full poem on a subway ride.
Yeah.
Just now.
Just now. Yeah. I did it from 242nd Street to 59th Street, and it's not even short.
In terms of cinema, I mean, After Poetry Destroys Silence is quite an extraordinary film in terms of the concept and the way that Richard pulls it together and brings it together with so many different poets.
Yeah.
What about your career? I mean, you have really gone on to play a whole variety of parts, some of them Jewish, but some of them not so Jewish. I mean, I can only imagine, I've not seen the film, you as a Hasidic Chazan in upstate New York.
Yeah, Shnan Schneider is the director. It's a great movie. Matthew Broderick is fantastic.
Going forward, I mean, I see that you put that.
Yeah, I'm shooting these days as well. I'm not allowed to speak this project.
Understood.
But it's a good one. And listen, I am not a trained actor. Everyone knows that. I didn't. Oh, you didn't?
Not from your acting. You certainly look like you're an exceptional actor.
You know, but I enjoy doing it. It's something that you know. I have an accent in English. I am clearly, you know, I can't play just about anybody or everybody. There's a certain role that resonates with me. I have to be an immigrant mostly in America, but I love doing it. There's a tremendous collective effort to make a movie. I just saw a movie called Desert Warrior, which is coming out in January. We did it during COVID. For half a year, I was in Saudi Arabia shooting it. Yeah. And I was the only Jew in the team. I had no problem at all. It was a fantastic experience. And it's really such an interesting thing of being together. Well, take the Jesus movie, right? 3 months, 7 countries. And
working with Terrence Malick.
Working with Terrence Malick, who's a real maestro. And you make friendships and all that, and it's really sort of a life in a life. It's so sad to farewell at the end. Like we really spent a whole lot of time together from breakfast to dinner, and we worked hard, and we failed, and we got up, and we tried again, and this and that. It's a wonderful. I wish everybody would know what a great thing is to be part of a movie making. I don't much care if I'm an actor or I'm holding the lamp, but the team, how we, you know, it's and if it succeeds, you know, you're sitting in the dark and you're watching your movie, and the people on your right and left are laughing or crying. It's just amazing what a work does it take to get to that end product that the people are watching.
Géza, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. The film is After Poetry Destroys Silence. Géza is performing with Melissa Leo and Beau Carré, and it's an important film, just in terms of dealing with this whole question of how does art struggle with catastrophe, with hardship, with.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.